Over the last few weeks, I've been gradually playing the first chapter of the Shattered Warpgate campaign for Planetside 2. Now that I've completed it, the question remains: what's my thoughts on it? Was the campaign enjoyable? How does the story hold up? And am I keen for Chapter 2? G'day there once again, viewers, this is your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today guys, we're going to be having a chat about Calamity, the first chapter of Planetside 2's Shattered Warpgate campaign. Now, I'm not going to lie guys, I took my sweet time getting this chapter completed. The update has been out for what, maybe 2-3ish weeks now? Yeah, I definitely haven't broken any speedrunning records for the chapter by a long shot, but the very first reflection I have about the campaign quote-unquote experience as a whole is that I don't really think it's meant to be a speedrunning exercise at all here. We as Planetside 2 players have been long conditioned to aggressively farm towards long-term endgame goals. You know, we want that shiny directive weapon or armor, we end up grinding for it for weeks on end non-stop. I know that there are times where I find myself randomly deciding, you know what, today's the day, I'm going to Araxium that weapon, and then I'll subsequently spend hours trying to jam a particular weapon into scenarios that simply don't work well for it in the name of getting closer to that sweet validation that comes from that shiny purple metal. But the campaigns are certainly the first feature we've seen in a very long time in this game that really encourages us to simply take our time and enjoy it over a longer burn. Rel has stated on multiple occasions that this was meant to be something that you could complete alongside the more traditional gameplay loop, something that you could come and go with on separate sessions based on what you were feeling like accomplishing in that session. And it's certainly the mentality that I followed while working towards the campaign, and I think it's influenced my time for the better. But anyway, let's discuss the campaign itself. Did I enjoy my time exploring Esamir and learning more about the calamity that is the Shattered Warpgate explosion? Overall, yes, I did. There were days where I decided that I really wasn't in the mood for shooting Planetmans, and I instead wanted to chill, immerse myself in Araxis, and learn more about the lore of this world. And that is admittingly something that I've wanted in the game for a long time, especially in an interactive form like this. Yes, there were admittingly a lot of fetch quests here, but again, if I chose my time right, then I really didn't mind being the docile space carrot farmer that good old Foster wanted me to be. I was, able just to soak in the scenery, enjoy the world around me, which is something that we don't often get a chance to do in this hectic gameplay that is the day-to-day of Planetside. It's worth noting that I didn't do any of the carrot hunting while the quests and the spawns were bugged, so that also helped me, get through things with a more positive light on the situation as well. But yeah, I did have fun with the campaign on my own terms. Grinding it hard and fast isn't the way to get the best experience here by a long shot, and I'm glad that I didn't rush myself through it to get a video out on day dot. I feel as though that would have tainted my opinion on the system entirely. One thing that I do have to give commendations for with the first chapter is actually the narrative that was on show here. The way in which the storyline travelled definitely kept me intrigued the entire time, and has actually left me really looking forward to Chapter 2, which is set to release on the 20th of November, assuming that things don't get delayed. But being 2020 and all of the shenanigans that 2020 has provided, it wouldn't surprise me if we did get a delay on that release date, but I'd be happy to wait for quality content over rushed content. But now guys, I would also like to spend some time talking about the story that was explored throughout the campaign and what we might be able to expect in the future as a result. A bit of theory crafting, if you will. But I also understand that some of you may wish to play out the story yourself without me spoiling things. So take note of the timestamp on your screen now and skip ahead to avoid any spoilers. Just a reminder, if you're still watching at this point, you're okay with things being spoiled. Don't at me in the comment section down below if you get pissed with me. Anyway, here we go. We start off startled by the sudden shift on Esamir. The explosion of the Northeast Warpgate has factions scrambling to repair and make the most of what happened to the now decimated continent that is Esamir. Nanite Systems have also taken note and employ the assistance of operatives to investigate the anomaly. You meet with Representative Foster, who immediately sends you down to the planet's surface, your faction leaders keeping tabs on your discoveries with the intent of exploiting the investigation in search of an advantage in the war. Initial investigations have you sent to the ruins of two bases that used to neighbour the Warpgate, North Point Station and Stillwater Watch, to find any intel you can. A correlation is immediately discovered between the instability of the northeastern Warpgate before it exploded and the very first quote-unquote real Araxian death that was recorded during the first Hossan expedition. With the reluctant assistance of data broker known as FL34, you are sent on an expedition to Hossan with the intent of stealing relevant information that relates to that very Hossan expedition and what might be documented about it. After rubbing some thinking hats together, a new prototype is created that could sap the energy from derelict vehicles that were left scattered across Esamir as a result of the explosion, which required the collection of said vehicles from the devastated bases. Vanu soldiers seen driving vanguards, TR soldiers seen driving mag riders, NC soldiers seen driving prowlers. It was a sight to behold. The leaders of each faction also ordered their soldiers to collect additional vehicles for private research efforts. Who knows what the factions are up to? Each faction also takes an interest in the nearby plant life that grew overnight after the Warpgate exploded and can only be described by soldiers as glowing space carrots. You are sent out into the northeast of the continent to collect samples for your R&D departments. Your respective faction also sends you to enemy biolabs with the goal of halting their own research progress in turn, trying to sabotage their efforts. But more pressing matters quickly come to the attention of Nanite Systems as they look skyward towards the impending storm on Esamir. Foster immediately sends you out to release weather drones into the storm to collect some data regarding the storm and what it can do, which amounts to the testing of new Nanite Systems tech that protects the wearer against the dangers of the storm. With a relatively successful test, Foster aims to bring the quote-unquote insulator technology to a wider production for Araxians across the board. But just when things seem to start looking up, tremors, or energy spikes, and anomalies start appearing on the continent. Things are actually getting worse. You are immediately tasked with investigating 3 energy spikes that appear to be forming nearby the currently operational warp gates. The warp gates that are mostly operational as malfunctions start to be reported to Nanite Systems. Geysers vomit energy in a way that begins to take form that takes resemblance to that of the Shattered Warpgate. Communications become choppy as Foster immediately sends you back to the Shattered Warpgate to investigate. Then silence before a new voice establishes communications with you. An archivist Dolan. Dolan requests your time for a few moments alone. He stands there, holographic in nature, and shares some information about the Warpgate that could change the tide of not the war itself, but the planet the war is fought on. Dolan tells you the Warpgate is in fact old technology known as a world anchor, a device capable of reshaping worlds in time that would only be considered fantasy. This particular world anchor is defective, obviously so, but left unchecked, and it may complete its goal as intended. Dolan urges you that they should leave the world anchor to its business, and that tampering or trying to harness the energy is a dangerous path to travel. He leaves you to stare at the Shattered Warpgate, the closest you've ever been to it up until this point, with one request, that you think it over. And that is where we are today. Was Dolan a hallucination? What's his connection to the war? Does he have an allegiance or an agenda? Only time will tell as we wait for Chapter 2. All we know, guys, is that things are going to be interesting in the coming weeks for the continent of Esamir. And guys, with the planet of Araxis showing severe instability, who knows exactly what this will mean for the long run. I remember that there are plenty of talks, once upon a time, about potential underground bases and caverns, and that could still very well be on the cards in my opinion, based on the fact that prior to the shattering, the NC were conducting plenty of deep earth mining operations. I mean, the tectonic pressure is allegedly diminishing according to the Nanite Systems news network. But if the readings from the last campaign mission are to go off anything, I'd beg to differ. There's just so many elements at play here. The derelict vehicles, who Nanites simply didn't deconstruct the vehicles. The fact that the Empires are now using those derelict vehicles to steal tech from one another. The fact that the geysers are surging in energy nearby functional warp gates. Could Esamir be about to change further? Is it set to continue evolving? A very wild, and albeit far-fetched theory from me, is that Esamir may just very well evolve into something entirely new with the World Anchor doing its work. Maybe it's going to become the new Ashur. But right now, There's no telling what's to come. Story-wise, I'm down. 100% keen for what's about to come. But there's undoubtedly some things the devs can learn from this experience. The elephant in the room here is of course the good old space carrots. Collecting 100 of these suckers will be an experience that is either going to get a positive or negative review depending on who you ask. Some, like myself, were able to get this part of the campaign done no trouble at all and take in some of the scenery while they were at it. Some encountered heavy resistance and were stuck in painful cycles of backtracking to the carrot hotspot with limited spawn options. And I can admit that from that perspective, that is a relatively frustrating mission to get through. The mission itself is very much something that would come from World of Warcraft or Guild Wars, go there, collect a bunch of stuff, a simple fetch quest, and normally you'd have other players in the same area doing that exact same quest. The reason it works more universally in those games as opposed to Planetside is thanks to the fact that they are PvE games in that sense. There are other players doing that quest with you, yes, but they aren't also actively trying to blow your brains out. Combine that with a really lengthy travel time back to the quest area, especially if you are unlucky enough to get the southwestern Warpgate as your spawn, and well, you have the issue at hand. Now, some may remember the comments that I made a couple of weeks back in my review of the Shattered Warpgate update as a whole, and how, I had to complete the campaign because I simply wasn't all that driven to go out and gather space carrots, and that the campaign was driven by a collection of fetch quests. At the end of the day, guys, the very nature of the campaign and how it takes you out of the general gameplay loop can be quite jarring. And back when I made that initial review, guys, I will admit, I did find it very jarring. It was just plain unenjoyable for some, and I wasn't all that driven to go out and doing it. But after completing the campaign, part of me still wishes that maybe a little bit more of the campaign was integrated into that general gameplay loop. But on that same note, I now also understand why the campaign is the way it is now. The developers have done their best to create an experience that doesn't integrate itself into the main game, and somewhat supplements that with another objective to experience, something that is entirely based on providing you a story. And it's very difficult to absorb a story like this if you're trying to worry about where you're going to get shot from 24/7. That at its core is not going to appease everyone as a gameplay style in a first-person shooter game, and I think the best way to get around that would be to offer some branching quest lines that appeased different styles of gameplay. Maybe Foster requires one section of operatives to handle one thing and the other another thing. I don't know what those things would be, but it would be a nice way to sort of, vary the gameplay a little bit to more players. And hell, maybe give the players who are a little bit more completionist in nature the ability to go back and complete both branching quest lines if they choose to do so. But if Chapter 2 were to launch with a similar design philosophy to what Chapter 1 went live with, I think a real key behind enjoying this campaign is being in the right mindset to do so. I haven't jumped into any campaign content unless I've been actively interested in doing it for that session. I didn't force it upon myself, and I think that right there will determine your enjoyment of the campaign. Whether you do it just for the sake of it, or whether you do it with the intent of separating yourself from the main game for a few minutes and just getting your teeth sunk into the lore a little bit more. If you're not interested in the lore, then the campaign's feature is quite simply not for you at all. And I don't necessarily view that as a critique on the campaign itself. It knows what it's trying to do, and it's doing it to a certain extent pretty well. I do believe that some of the quests can be improved upon for the PvP arena that is Planetside. But overall, we've got a good starting point here, and I'm personally really looking forward to seeing what Chapter 2 provides as a campaign. And guys, with all that said, that's going to conclude today's video discussing the Calamity chapter in the Shattered Warpgate update. Guys, I'm planning on doing a video like this for every chapter that comes out as I complete them, so guys, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're interested in that style of video in the long run. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video as well, be sure to backhand the like button, and if you want to support the channel even further, guys, you can go ahead and click the join button down below to become a channel member. It goes a long way in supporting the channel and allows me to do this a lot more often, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video, guys. Peace out, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.